Hello my friends. Today I want to begin with a simple question. What is the first thing you do every morning? Think about it honestly. Before your feet touch the floor, before you drink a cup of coffee, before you even smile at another person, what happens? For many people, the answer is always the same. They reach for their phone, they check notifications, they scroll through social media, they read messages that can wait. They fill their minds with hundreds of distractions before giving even 1 minute to their own dreams. It seems like a small habit, but life is often changed by small habits. Success is rarely built in 1 minute to their own dreams. When people ask me how I became successful, they often expect me to talk about Alibaba, business or leadership. They imagine there must have been one secret decision that changed everything. But when I look back at my own life, I don't see one magical moment. I see thousands of ordinary mornings. I see small decisions repeated again and again until they became habits. Success doesn't suddenly appear one day. It grows slowly, just like a tree, or one step farther away from it. The choice is usually very small, but the result becomes very big over time. When I was young, I wasn't different because I was smarter than everyone else. In fact, I failed many exams. I wasn't the best student in my class, and my family certainly wasn't rich. Nobody looked at me and thought I would one day speak to audiences around the world. But I had something that many people around me didn't have. I was curious. I wanted to understand the world outside my hometown. I wanted to meet people from different countries. Most importantly, I wanted to learn English because I believed it could become a bridge to opportunities I couldn't yet see. Many years ago, before the city became busy, I climbed onto my bicycle almost every morning and rode for 40 minutes to a hotel. I didn't go there because someone paid me. I didn't go because my parents told me to. I simply wanted conversations. I wanted to hear real English. I wanted to practice speaking even when I made mistakes. Sometimes I understood only half of what people were saying. Sometimes my pronunciation was terrible. Sometimes I felt embarrassed because I couldn't find the right words. But every single morning I came back again. Looking back today, I realized I wasn't only learning a language. I was training myself to become comfortable doing difficult things every day. While many children were still sleeping, I was practicing English. While other people were waiting for opportunities to arrive, I was preparing for opportunities that hadn't appeared yet. Those early mornings gave me much more than vocabulary. They taught me discipline. They taught me patience. They taught me consistency. Years later, people admire the results, but very few people ever saw the routine that created those results. That is the way success usually works. People notice the achievement, but they rarely notice the habits behind it. They watch another 100 YouTube videos. They collect information every single day, but they never build a habit of actually speaking. They think they need to know more before they begin. But knowledge alone has never created confidence. Confidence comes from action. The more you wait to feel ready, the longer your English stays exactly where it is. Now, let me ask you another question. Why do you think mornings are so powerful? Is there something magical about 6 o'clock in the morning? Of course not. The magic isn't in the clock. The magic is in your attention. When you first wake up, your mind is calm. It hasn't been filled with work, school, emails, stress, or responsibilities. Imagine your brain as a clean whiteboard. As the day continues, that whiteboard slowly fills with meetings, problems, conversations, worries, and distractions. By evening, there is very little space left for learning something new. That is why so many people promise themselves they will practice English at night, but never actually do it. They finish work feeling exhausted. They sit down with an English book, but their mind is already somewhere else. They watch an English lesson, but after 10 minutes, they realize they haven't remembered anything. They are simply trying to learn at the moment when their energy is at its lowest. Morning is different. Morning belongs to you before it belongs to the rest of the world. The first 30 minutes after you wake up are some of the most valuable minutes of your entire day. If you spend those minutes feeding your brain with distractions, your attention becomes weaker. But if you spend those minutes speaking English, listening carefully, and training your mind, something remarkable begins to happen. English slowly becomes part of your daily routine, instead of another task you keep postponing. I once met a young woman named Sarah, who dreamed of working for an international company. Her English wasn't bad. She could read books, she could understand podcasts, She even watched English movies without much difficulty. But when it was time to speak, everything changed. Every evening she promised herself she would practice after dinner. Every evening she found another excuse. She was tired, she had work to finish. She wanted to relax. Sometimes she watched English videos, but she rarely opened her mouth. She spent years improving her understanding why her speaking stayed almost exactly the same. One morning, she decided to change just one habit. Instead of reaching for her phone after waking up, she gave the first 30 minutes of her day to English. She spoke to herself while making her bed. She described the weather. She talked about her plans for work. Then she listened to a short English podcast while preparing breakfast. Before leaving home, she stood in front of a mirror and answered one simple question in English. What kind of person do I want to become today? It wasn't a complicated routine, but it became one of the most important habits of her life. During the third week, she noticed she wasn't translating every sentence anymore. By the end of the month, something had quietly changed. English was no longer something she only studied. It had become something she actually used, and that is the real goal. Fluency doesn't begin when you know thousands of words. Fluency begins when English becomes part of your everyday life. So before we continue, I want you to remember one simple truth. Your future isn't built by what you do once in a while. It is built by what you do every morning. Because the way you begin your morning often determines the person you become by the end of the year. Now you may be wondering, what should I actually do during those 30 minutes? Let me give you a simple morning routine that anyone can follow. It doesn't require expensive courses, perfect grammar, or a native English teacher. It only requires consistency. The first of 5 minutes are for waking up your English brain. Before you look at your phone, before you open social media, begin speaking English out loud. Talk about your room. Describe the weather. Explain how you slept. Tell yourself what you plan to do today. Your sentences don't have to be long or impressive. They only need to be real. Tell yourself you may forget simple vocabulary. You may even feel a little embarrassed talking to yourself. That feeling is completely normal, because you are doing something new. Every fluent English speaker was once a beginner who sounded awkward. The difference is that they continued. After those first few minutes, spend the next 10 minutes listening to English that inspires you. Choose a podcast, an interview, or a speech that makes you want to become better. Don't listen like a student preparing for an exam. Listen like someone having a conversation with a friend. When I was talking with tourists as a young boy, I wasn't only learning words. I was learning how English sounded in real life. I was training my ears without even realizing it. Before your mouth can speak naturally, your ears must first learn what natural English sounds like. The next 10 minutes are my favorite part of the routine. This is where you begin shadowing. If you've never heard of shadowing before, don't worry. It is one of the simplest and most effective speaking exercise you can do. Listen to one sentence, pause the audio and repeat exactly what you heard. At first, you will probably speak more slowly than the speaker. That's okay. Speed comes later. Right now, your goal is to teach your mouth how English feels. Your tongue is learning new movements. Your lips are learning new sounds. Every repetition makes speaking a little more natural than it was yesterday. For the final 5 minutes, close the podcast, put away your notes, and simply speak. Tell a story about yesterday. Describe your plans for the afternoon, explain your idea. If you forget a word, don't stop speaking. Find another way to explain your idea. If you forget a word, don't stop speaking. Find another way to explain your idea. Explain something interesting you learned recently. If you forget a word, don't stop speaking. Find another way to explain your idea. This habit trains something much more important than grammar. It trains confidence. The more often you continue speaking despite mistakes, the less power fear has over you. I remember meeting a young man named Michael who dreamed of studying overseas. He had spent years memorizing vocabulary and completing grammar exercises. His test scores were excellent, but every time he imagined speaking with international students, fear took control. He believed his accent wasn't good enough. He believed people would judge every mistake he made. One day he decided to stop chasing perfection and start chasing consistency. Every morning before breakfast, he followed a simple 30-minute routine, just like this one. He believed people would judge every mistake he made. One day, he decided to stop chasing perfection and start chasing consistency. Most mornings he felt excited. Other mornings he wanted to sleep a little longer, but he remembered something very important. Success doesn't belong to the people who feel motivated every day. Success belongs to the people who continue even when motivation disappears. 2 months later, Michael joined an online discussion with students from different countries. For the first time, he didn't panic when someone asked for his opinion. His English still wasn't perfect. He still made grammar mistakes. His pronunciation still carried the accent of his home country. But something inside him had changed. Instead of worrying about every word, he focused on sharing his ideas. At the end of the meeting, another student smiled and said, "You explained that really well." Those 5 words stayed with him for weeks, because they proved something he had never believed before. People were listening to his ideas, not counting his mistakes. Many learners spent years trying to eliminate every mistake before they allowed themselves to speak. But that day taught Michael, and I hope it teaches you, that communication is never about perfection. Think about all the people around the world who use English every day. They come from India, Brazil, Germany, Japan, Korea, France, China, Africa, and hundreds of other countries. Every one of them makes small mistakes from time to time. Yet, they communicate successfully because communication has never depended on sounding perfect. It depends on having the courage to open your mouth and speak. Looking back on my own life, I realized that English gave me something much greater than another language. It gave me access to the world. It introduced me to different ideas, different cultures, and different ways of thinking. Every conversation with a foreign visitor expanded my mind a little more. If I had stayed at home every morning, because I was afraid of making mistakes, my life would have been completely different. That is why I believe your morning routine is not really about English. English is simply the tool. The real goal is becoming the kind of person who keeps promises to yourself. Every morning you wake up and choose learning instead of distraction. You become more disciplined every morning. You speak instead of staying silent. You become more confident every morning. You continue. Even when you don't feel like practicing, you become tomorrow. One day you wake up and realize that discipline no longer feels difficult. It has become part of who you are. Before we finish today's episode, I want to leave you with 3 simple ideas. First, protect your mornings, because they shape the rest of your day. Second, stop waiting until you feel confident to speak English, because confidence is always the result of action, never the beginning of it. Third, remember that fluency is not created by one extraordinary day of studying. It is created by hundreds of ordinary mornings when you choose progress over excuses. So tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, before you answer a single message, before the world begins demanding your attention, choose yourself. Spend 30 minutes speaking, listening, repeating, and thinking in English. Do it again the next day, and the day after that. One morning you will suddenly realize that you are no longer translating every sentence in your head. You are no longer afraid to speak.